So I'm starting this video a little bit late, but I'll recap a little bit. Basically, we're making a package die, which is a die line used for in the printing industry if you're creating anything where it's not basically a rectangle. You need to have a die line to cut out the shape of the thing. So if it's a rectangle, you can use a guillotine, obviously, like if it was doing a poster or a postcard. You do the design, it just cut in a guillotine. But if it's going to cut in a different shape than that, then you need to have a die line created. So with this one, if it was three-dimensional, I could take this here to give you a sense of what this would look like. This would go here, this would go here, and then this piece would go to here, this would go to here. So those are those three panels. So this measurement always has to be the same as that one. You can change the proportions however you like. You can make it longer, you can make it shorter. You can make these panels longer, but this one would have to grow as well if you did that. Okay, so once I've got to this point, we have two other flaps that we're going to put on this side here. So one I'm going to put right here. This would be the same width as that panel. It actually ends up being a little bit smaller, but for our purposes here, it's basically the same width. You also want it so it's basically half this width. So I didn't do this totally accurately, but you'd make that basically half the width of this. It could be a little bit less. And then this normally needs to come in a little bit here because it's going to fold down before you fold this lid in. I'll bring this in a little bit as well. So these are what are referred to as the dust flaps, the bits that fold in on the box before you put the lid in, the lid down. And we would have the same thing on the other side. So if I choose the reflect tool, I can go to the center of this shape, option click, and then reflect over that and hit copy. At the top here, I'm going to have another flap, which is going to be the one that goes inside the box when the lid closes. This one normally is rounded at the top. So if I select with the direct selection tool and drag this in like this, it would look something like that usually. It might be that it just goes in like this. This is also another way of doing it. It's just to have that bit at an angle. But the idea of this, and I think it works better when it's rounded, is that this flap has to go into the back of the box. So by rounding off the corners, it makes it easier for that flap to go inside. We would also have the same structure at the bottom. So sometimes on some boxes they'll use a different way of creating the bottom of the box, which would be stronger, like where they sort of interlock. But we could just reflect this over here. This time I would do it horizontal and hit copy, and then you'd get the bottom of the box. You also will see them where they're like this, where this panel is on this side. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. The only difference is that if you had it this way, when you look at the box on the shelf, the opening for the box is here, and the fold is at the back. So if you think of this as the front of the box. So here you'd only have folds on the front of the box, and on the back of the box you'd have an opening at the top and the bottom. You also might want to put a little hole right here, so that somebody can open the box more easily. So this would be like roughly the size of a thumb. And then you go to Pathfinder. I think the size I'm making this box, this is probably a little bit too small, but that's the basic idea. That way, when this folds down, remember it's going to end up folding into this panel. It will make it easier for you to open the box by having a place to pull this tab without having to stick your fingernail in there. So that's the basic structure. We have one more panel which would go on this end. I didn't quite get that in the right place. And these two bits would go in slightly. So all I'm doing is holding shift and using, in this case, the up arrow twice, and at the top I use the down arrow twice to nudge it down. The purpose of that is that this is going to glue the box together. So this panel will glue to this panel. So those four panels will fold around and they'll glue together. And by having them come in like that at an angle, first of all, you don't really see that piece If you open the box up, it's not so obvious. But also, if you were to put glue all the way along here and it goes right to the top, there's a danger that the lid could get glued together. So by having it stay within that area, it sort of prevents that from happening a little bit. Normally, the way I would structure the file would be that the die would want to be on its own layer, so there's nothing else on that layer at all, because at the end you're going to replace that die with the die that the cardboard engineer has done if you were doing a real print job, and so we need to keep that separate. You don't want to put designs into these shapes, those want to go underneath it. I could also make a duplicate of this, so I'm going to do a copy, as I've already got a layer. If I hadn't got a layer, I would just hold Option and duplicate the layer, or drag it down here and create a duplicate, because I want the same stuff again to create a background color. So on this layer, I'm just going to paste in place. Shift-Command-V. So I have this. If I turn the die layer off, which has the die on, I still have it now on this layer, which is the background color. And I'm going to use Pathfinder to unite all those shapes together. So not always, but generally speaking, packages have a sort of one all over color. Now we also want to add a little bit of bleed to that. So to add some bleed to it, I can go to Object, Path, Offset Path. And the bleed would normally be 0.125 of an inch. That's 1/8 of an inch. Sometimes in packaging, actually, it gets a little bit more if the printer may ask for 1/4 of an inch. But generally, it's a standard would be 1/8 of an inch in most situations. And then I would lock this layer. All of my design I would then sandwich in between. So I might have additional layers in between these two. Like I might have one layer which is for type, and another layer which is for illustrations and so on. But usually I would keep it fairly simple. I'd have the die separate, I'd have the background color separate, and then I'd have any other design sort of sandwiched in between. So that's kind of what I've got set up on this one. I've got the die on the top, the background color on here. This one actually should also really go down onto the background color probably. And then here's a couple of ways that you could take stuff from your Illustrator file and then put it into the mockup. So with something like this, one of the problems I have is that my square here, which is what I want to replace on the file. So if I go to the Photoshop file, I'll close this one for a second. So if I go to this layer, which is the top of the box, and open it, I have this square which I'm going to put the design into. Now it's gray, so I could copy this whole thing. I'd have to cut it out though somehow, so it's a little bit awkward. The other thing you could do is you could zoom in on it like this, so you get as big a view as you can get, so you can get a high resolution picture of it, and then do a screen capture. So on a Mac this would be Shift-Command-4, and then I can drag across to create a selection of that part of the screen. Make sure that nothing that you're dragging across is selected, because it will also capture an image of the selected anchor points and so on. But I'll take a capture of that. Then in the Photoshop file, if I do File Open, this will be stored on the desktop and it'll be called Screen Capture. So this is the one that I just did. I can open this, select all, copy it, close it, and then I can paste it into this one. Now it's pasting in smaller, but I can scale it holding Option. Here it looks really fuzzy as I'm scaling it, but it's only because I'm in the process of scaling it. If I double click to apply it, you can see it kind of snaps back, and it's still pretty high resolution, high enough for the purposes I'm doing here. I'm going to do Command S to save that file and then close it. You can see that it's now updated on the top of this box. I also did one for a mug. With this one, when I first got it, it had a different color, so I've changed the color of the mug. It's pretty easy to change the color on this mock-up. I can go in here and switch to a different color pretty easily. So this one I just dialed in the number which I have as part of my visual identity, which is 85% magenta, 100% yellow, 0% black, 0% cyan, and then I've got the color that I'm using. You might find that when you get it on the mock-up, you still want to kind of adjust it because it's a photographic image. Here it feels a little too saturated, so I'm going to knock it back a little bit. So that's the basic idea. And again, if you look at the file, it's got this layer. I can double click on it and I can change this to whatever I want. So right now I've got this on. When I first got it, it had this on here and this actually. Mock-ups for free. So I've just turned these layers off and then I can bring in whatever I wanted to bring into here. So if I wanted the mug to have a different logo on it, I could select the one that I wanted to use, or any other kind of artwork, obviously. Maybe I'll also add some of these in there. I can copy it and then paste it into this file. If I paste it as a smart object here, don't forget it's connected to the Illustrator file, or it's connected to an Illustrator file, a version of this. Let me change my background color as well. On this one, I've never noticed this before, but in this lab, when I click here, this waiting for libraries seems to stay here forever. But if I hit stop, it still actually places it. So I don't know what that's all about, really. If I double click here, I can change the background. I'll save this file and then hit W, and you can see it's updated here. So actually the white background here doesn't really work very well. Double click, get rid of that. See if we keep it transparent. I'll do save, close it, and then you can see it's working. I don't like the design of that, but I could easily rearrange it. I'm going to get rid of the footballs and just scale this logo bigger. So to get rid of the football, I'm just going to make a selection around it. These are all on the same layer. And then I'm going to add a mask onto it. Save this file and then update it, and then I've got that version. So this was another one that came along with the one that I was just showing you. In this case, it shows both the front, the one side, and the top. You could also use this to show the other side, the back as well, if you wanted to, so that you get an all-round view of it. Because the idea of these mock-ups is to give a really good sense of what the finished package would actually look like. All right, so just to recap, I've put these package templates onto the page for today's class. These are zipped files that if you download it and open it up, it's a set of files like this of package templates. So this is one example, for instance. It's a little bit difficult to tell exactly what these would be like without looking at the books that are associated with it. So if you're in the class, and I'll bring them to the next class as well, but you can take a look at the book, see which image is the kind of box that you want to do if you want to do a piece of package design, and then you can see which template that you need. The page numbers are the reference number in those files. So if you go into the folder, where's my version of it? So this number, which has the name of the file, is the page number in the particular book. The one which is called package templates, the book's called package templates, and the folder which is called package mockups, the book is called, package prototypes. the book is called Package Prototype. So it's these two books which have the templates. Okay. And then I put a couple of other books in here that are also package design. So there's this one called the Package Design book, which is just lots of really good examples of package design if you want to take a look at those. Just to be clear, it isn't a requirement that you do a package design project for the class, but you're doing various print purposes. So that's one example. And if you're trying to build a portfolio and you haven't got a piece of package design, it's a nice challenge to try and create something like that, because it also gives you the opportunity to sort of design something which is three-dimensional, which is always kind of an interesting challenge. Okay.